Welcome to Corpse Club, the official podcast of DailyDead.com. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jonathan James. Today I am joined by Derek Anderson, and we are talking Barbarian. You've probably heard a lot about it online already. Hopefully you've seen it. If you haven't, go see it. We're going to talk about some spoilers. And so big old spoiler warning there, because I feel like the best way for us to talk about it is to talk about it. But we're not going to jump into Barbarian right away because I haven't caught up with you a little bit, Derek. And I always like to hear about what's going on. I'll tell our readers what's been going on with me and tell you. But there's always our catch-up time. And of course, because it's just the two of us, if you've been a longtime Corpse Club listener, you know that usually if it's just Derek, we what do you call it? We lean back a little bit. We take it easy. We have our old fashions. And so in our, following that tradition, we have our old fashions ready, and we're ready to hang out with you for this episode.
Yes, absolutely. It's great to have another bourbon-soaked episode here, and I've been looking forward to sipping on this old-fashioned for quite some time, so it's nice to kind of let the hair down and just, like I said, kick back and relax. And it's been a busy second half of the summer. A lot of really cool things happening. I got to go down to the Popcorn Frights Film Festival and be on the jury for that festival once again, which was a really cool experience, and a lot of movies, both feature length and short films to watch with that festival, both virtually and in person. And then I got to go to Boston. I got to go out there with my dad, and that was my first time being in Boston, really my first time kind of being in that northeastern part of the country. So other than Montreal, but in the United States, it was kind of my first time in that region. So that was a lot of fun too.
Cool. Yeah, that's I know you had a lot of fun at Popcorn Frights. I'm glad you had to spend some time there and some time with your dad. For me, I made my first trip out to Los Angeles in 2.5 years. It was a quick trip. So if you're listening to us now and you're like, I didn't know he was out in LA. It was just a few day thing. I had to run in and out. I will be back soon, but I think one of the things that I'll talk about, because it's kind of weird, is that I think there are so many people out there that want to just get back to normal, but we're not. Things aren't normal, and I went outside and I'm like, there's a lot of people without masks, and I know there are a lot of people out there that still are wearing masks, and you're probably in the minority. I know I was. My wife and I were on a plane. We were some of the only people wearing a mask, and when we'd go out or we'd take a Lyft or an Uber, we'd be the only people we'd see with masks on, and so it's kind of strange, but we don't want to get sick. We have family members that are immune compromised. And so, I think for our listeners, for those of you that, I know some of you for work reasons or whatever the case, you may be out pretty frequently. But I do want to say for those of you who are still staying in, who are still masking, obviously, 1,000,000% there's nothing wrong with it, but also it's normal. My wife and I are in a similar situation. So, this is the first time we got out in a while. It was different. But I was happy to be back. I got to see Heather again, first time in 2.5 years, maybe more. And so I caught up with her and met up with a few people I haven't seen in a while. So that was very nice. A little scary, awesome, but very nice.
Yeah. And you got to experience Halloween Horror Nights, I believe.
Yeah, we did.
It's amazing to think it's already that time of year for Halloween Horror Nights, but it's always a multi-month event. So it's awesome that it's already, spooky season again.
Yeah, it was really cool to do. Again, it's one of those things we haven't done it in a while. And again, just as part of the work opportunities kind of took me out there. I'm like, okay, well, we'll do it. We'll mask up and go. There were still a lot of people there, and
I can imagine.
Yeah, but and the thing about LA, it's interesting because they're in a heat wave. And I heard about it. I'm like, well, I've been, it's probably just a little warm. And no, it was really warm. It was cooler in the mazes than it was outside. And so I had a great time. I had a fantastic time. There were 10 mazes and all kinds of different events and stuff. And it was wonderful. We spent 6 hours there. but
Whoa.
it was also like
Oh,
90 degrees. So, which it's not usually in LA at that time. And it was muggy. And so that was an experience in itself. But it's always cool to see what that team comes up with. My favorite maze was The Weeknd. The Weeknd had like
oh
like
yeah.
the recording. I was like, he had a themed maze, and it was all like based on. It's kind of like, I don't want to, for people who are going to don't want to spoil it, but I mean it. Usually the mazes will like follow like a movie, so you're following scenes of a movie. So if it's Halloween, you're following like scenes from the original and The Exorcist, and so they're like these iconic scenes come to life. That's the big piece of it. But because it's The Weeknd, it's like, well, what do you do? But he has like, there is like a through line, there is like this storyline that follows it. Like it really follows a creative vision. There were a lot of like times where I couldn't tell what was like a mannequin and what was a scare actor, and so I thought it was really cool. So like, maybe because it was different, because some of these other ones I had seen before, like that was my favorite. There were some other really good ones too. But Killer Clowns from Outer Space. They had La Llorona. They had classic Universal Monsters. So it was cool. So if you're able to go and you mask up, and I'd say it's if you feel comfortable going out, it's worth your time. I know that in Orlando they have their own version of it. I say that because they're different teams making it. So even if you had like a Halloween maze in each, they're going to be a little different, but they also have then different houses, different mazes. But yeah, it was cool. So I'm glad we got to do it. We're back now. We're exhausted. It's just kind of getting used to it. And again, I know for some people, like, for work or whatever, like some people haven't skipped a beat. Even if you do wear a mask, or people who've just gone back to like normal, but like we've been inside a lot. So it was like, that's a lot of people. And now we're going to kind of just stay inside and quarantine by ourselves for a little bit, and then rejoin our bubble.
It is kind of sensory overload, that first like big trip that you have after the last couple of years. Like that first one, it's kind of, you feel that almost like that overwhelming feeling where you're just trying to get used to being around people again, or just traveling in general and all that kind of stuff. It takes like a while to really like get used to the idea of even like re-immersing yourself into society, or like events or things like that, and to do it at a level that you're comfortable with based on all the factors that everyone's got. So it's very and then on top of that, you're going into like a maze where people are trying to scare you, so it's like there's a lot going on there. But I'm glad that you and Christy got to enjoy that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then as part of that, which I guess will kind of segue into us talking Barbarian, like I haven't been in a movie theater in ages. But before we left, and like, we're going to be, like, so we'll be quarantining soon so that we can see our family. But I was like, well, we could see a movie. So I went to the Chinese theater and in Hollywood, and saw Barbarian. And I figured, you get great sound and a great picture. And so it's like, well, might as well see it the best way possible. Plus, I knew everybody was already saying, like, I'm not going to spoil it, but like, you need to see it. And I knew that it was just a matter of time before I'm scrolling online, somebody spoiled it. So I'm like, if I don't see it this weekend, it's going to get spoiled. So, so we saw it on the big screen. So it was nice.
That's awesome.
And then I'll give one more warning. Like, I don't feel like we can have a good discussion about Barbarian without going into spoilers. If you want to hear us talk about it and you haven't seen it, that's totally cool. Some people are like, I don't care about spoilers. And so that's great. Then hang out. But like, this is a real warning. Like, you really, like, if you don't like spoilers, like you don't want to know anything going into this, like you can come back to this episode after you've seen it. It's okay. We'll be okay. So with that being said, let's talk Barbarian, Derek. I'll just start by saying, I guess, that this one was like really surprising for me. And it's not because of the movie's surprises. It's just because I was aware it was a movie being released, but it wasn't really like on my radar. And I think this was probably the case for a lot of people, that like I had seen, and I don't usually watch a lot of the trailers, but I had seen clips of the trailer. And I was like, okay, like an Airbnb horror film. Like I know they've kind of done some things like with that in the past. And there's been some other or there are some things in the works. So I was like, it's a rental. Like, okay, something happens. And I just was not expecting this level of insanity. It was really cool. Um, and we'll dive into it a little bit more. We'll peel back the layers as we get into it. But I think the short of it is that like many people, I really found myself liking it, and I'll be suggesting it to a lot of people. I want to see other people's reactions to it. But yeah, what did you think?
Yeah, similar to you, it just checks so many boxes and was so unexpected in the most delightful way possible. Just seeing the reactions to this movie over the last several weeks and hearing the buzz about it before it got like a wide theatrical release, which in itself seems like kind of a miracle that a movie like this gets a platform where you can go see it on the big screen, and you can see it at so many theaters across the country right now. And kudos to the marketing team, because this is like one of those movies, like, for the last, if you've been seeing a movie like over the summer, like this is one of those like 4 or 5 horror movies that has had its trailers showing for a while in the theater. And so I'd seen the trailer for this, but like they really don't show, like, they don't give away any of the surprises, like the really, like the key surprises. Like they hit it so well. Like I think even like Justin Long's character was only like a split second in the trailer, where they made it seem like such a different movie. And I love that they did that, because I think so often like a movie like this, they just sort of been like, oh, here's the big reveal, here's how we get you in the theater, is we're going to show you just how insane this movie gets by the end. But the fact that they just like really kind of low key played it, and almost like just had it be like a best kept secret, and then relied on the buzz on Twitter from critics who saw it early, and that was just like the best marketing campaign ever. So it did not disappoint.
Yeah, I think it was really smart because, and many people have said this, but like, especially these days, like the best way to kind of reach a wider audience is to get them with a simple concept. And that was what the marketing did here. It lured them in with like, you're in, you're in this Airbnb and something goes wrong. There's something scary in the basement. Like, don't go downstairs. And that's kind of enough of a hook to like get your, like your, 18, year old audience in being like, oh, I got to see this. Mm-hmm. And then also like it premiered at Comic-Con, it played at Fright Fest, and not a lot of people spoiled it. So they did a good job of kind of just like, as you mentioned about, because there were, critics and fans alike were seeing this, and we're not letting people know what they got into. Of course, I had heard, I think people did know that there were surprises or there were twists, because people were kind of comparing it to Malignant. And although I don't, I guess I'll kind of get out of the way. I don't feel like this is like, I wouldn't compare, like, it's not the same movie as Malignant for anybody who's listening to this now and you haven't seen either movie. But I think both movies kind of are in the same spirit, where I think both filmmakers, Zach Cregger for Barbarian and James Wan, they said, we're going to make a movie that's not, that kind of goes against like the traditional Hollywood mold. And I would say that while Malignant certainly, I think it maybe is like the more entertaining one, and that's debatable, but that's just my opinion. I do feel like Barbarian takes more risks, because I feel like there are enough things that Barbarian, like, it breaks traditional storytelling formats. And that's what Malignant has, that twist and that surprise. And of course, like, it really like goes to extremes in the end. But Barbarian really kind of breaks what you would think, because it's a 20th Century Studios movie, so it's a Disney release. I'm surprised that this even got released theatrically, and maybe we can talk say that and talk about it a little bit more later. But like, Prey's not getting released at theaters, but Barbarian is. So like that's kind of amazing in itself. But I think
it really is.
Yeah, but I think one of the cool things about this really is, like I said, how risky it is, and the risks that Zach Cregger, who directed and wrote it, took in telling this story that's quasi-anthology. It's like anthology in the way that like Pulp Fiction's an anthology film. It's these different stories, and they do link up as you kind of learn more. So I really like. I just really like how many risks this studio film took, and specifically, Zach Cregger, I because he both directed and wrote it.
Yeah, and if you don't know like Zach Cregger's background as like this comedy guy from the comedy troupe The Whitest Kids You Know, and I was surprised to look back and see that he had co-directed the movie Miss March from like 2009, which I remember seeing the trailer for when I was in high school, and to think like, oh, that's that same guy. So he's been in the comedy world for so long, and not really knowing that that much about him before seeing the movie. It's like it's kind of marketed as this like really gnarly, like hardcore horror movie, but then it's such a surprise when you still get that, but you also get like all of this comedy on top of it, and a lot of situations where it's funny depending on the person, like the viewer watching it. Like some people might get more annoyed at certain things. I just had a blast. I was like freaking out but also laughing throughout the movie. So it's amazing. And like you said, with this anthology format, there's some turns that are like so hard left turns that I could see people like maybe wanting to walk out of the theater because it's so like, wait, what's going on now, such those kinds of moments. But then it all kind of comes together in such a great way, and it really, like, if you're patient with it, it really pays off. So it would have been fun to see this like in a really crowded theater, to see like all the different reactions. I saw it in a theater with two other people, but they really, and they were kind of voicing like their surprise at certain moments, but they stuck it out, and they seemed to enjoy it by the end. So it's just one of those movies where it's very, like you said, it takes a lot of risks. It's got that Pulp Fiction kind of style to it, and then it all comes together at the end in a very satisfying way.
Yeah, and it's interesting how this movie certainly has its influences, but you'd be hard pressed to say that it's specifically one thing, because I can certainly see, some Wes Craven. But then if you go to the, of course, and back to spoiler warning, but that'll be the last one. But Bill Skarsgård getting killed is a total like Hitchcock. That's your Psycho right there. And yes. So like you can point to these individual moments, but while I was watching it, I wasn't like, oh, this is someone trying to mimic other filmmakers. It feels, like he learned from them, but then made something that certainly feels like his own. And I really do love the that first segment where you have Georgina Campbell and you have Bill Skarsgård.
Yep.
And she shows up, and they just really play up the awkwardness. I love Bill Skarsgård's performance, like when he gets the wine and he's like, I left the wine here, basically because I knew you'd think I was going to poison it. He was kind of stumbling through his words. And, even, for me, again, because I didn't see any of the trailers, I hadn't heard anything. Like, I still thought that he was like, up until the point that he died, I thought that he was going to I was waiting for it. I'm like, when is he going to show that he's really a bad guy? And then he wasn't. Even when he goes downstairs and it's like, oh, I'll be back. Like, I believe what you said, but I need to see it for myself. And he goes downstairs.
Just one of those facepalm moments as an audience member where you're thinking, why would you want to go down there? But it's another brilliant kind of misdirect on the director's part, because it's such a they just put so much work into making you think that Skarsgård's character is in on it somehow, or that he is the one doing all of these things in the house. And it's like a masterclass in acting, especially, Bill coming from the performance as Pennywise in the two It movies that came out in recent years. So you're already kind of going in with these expectations of, that he can play a psychopathic killer very, very well. And so you have these preconceived notions as a horror fan. And I think he's playing on that too. And then also, curiously, he's an executive producer on the movie. So I feel like he just really brought a lot to this film in so many different creative ways. And I think that Zach knew exactly what he was doing when he had him play that role, because like you, I thought for sure that he was in on it on some level. And now I want to like rewatch the movie just to like experience that first half of the film, knowing that he's not in on it. And like, why does he have, like the night terrors and stuff like that? It just kind of makes you wonder like more about his character's backstory and how that all played into all of the misdirection.
Yeah. And then they do a great job in that first segment of making you think it's paranormal, because, Georgina, her door opens, right? We see Bill's character with the night terrors. We hear whispers. We see the door close on its own. And the interesting thing about the door is it just closes on its own. It's just one of those doors. There's nothing supernatural about it. It just closes. And so I think that was a wonderful misdirection. It's like, well, what if you had a door that looks like, something sinister is closing, but it just closes. And when she puts the chair there to stop it, it stops, because there's nothing, at least that we're aware of, there's nothing supernatural that appears to be at play in moving this. So I thought that was really cool. I also really like that we go from, and I guess I will kind of weave this in part. So I guess something else that I really like and that we see them setting up is the social commentary, and also what sets a great movie apart from others. Kind of talking, and we do have, Georgina and Bill's characters, and they're talking about, kind of the gender politics, or what would happen if it were swapped, her being a woman there and being more cautious and rightfully so. And so we do start to see, Zach kind of playing with these, like I said, with these social topics, and then goes from something that's maybe a bit of an undercurrent in the first segment to kind of hitting you on the head with it right away, or after the first 5 minutes in segment 2. Now we see Bill Skarsgård character is this one that looks more devious, but on the inside, he really is a good guy from what we can see. And then we get Justin Long, who is, like good guy, likable Justin Long, like the actor, like, oh, somebody we know. And, he's singing. It's like, it does that quick switch where it's like, oh, it's happy. Like he's driving his car, like it's sunny, like things are good. Like he's living the best life. And then you find out that he's this piece of shit. And it doesn't take long. And then as we continue to follow his character, even though they do have some kind of ups and downs where they make you think he's going to maybe, turn out to be a better person at the end, even though we do know that he was a complete piece of shit, what do you call it? Before he gets to the Airbnb that he owned. They do a really good job of kind of playing with that, of establishing that, hey, in this movie and in the real world, there are people that can smile at you and can be rapists, can be people who will do you harm, and I think that I think that Zach did kind of a good job of kind of inverting those segments and getting the right actors to kind of play those roles.
Yeah, it's very subversive. It's like you said, it's very timely, and the way they go into it, with the way they switch from the moment that Bill Skarsgård has his head bashed against the wall, and then cutting to Justin Long, and like you feel like you're in an entirely different movie, but it's such a fascinating turn of events, because then you follow this very unlikable character, and then like who just is on this road, this path to unknowingly putting himself exactly where the other characters were. And then I love how like he shows up at the house and he's seeing like how things were left, like with the chair and the mirror in the basement. And like it's kind of like this weird kind of, it almost feels like he's in a sequel at that point, and he's coming across this stuff where you're like, oh, like you see another character react to all these things that just happened, but it's in the same movie. And but it kind of keeps things fresh, because it would have been really easy for Zach to just say, you know, we have this really creepy concept, we have this really creepy maze, like they could easily have done like a 90-minute horror movie just based on that concept alone. But the fact that they bring in the Justin Long character and kind of incorporate more social commentary, which builds upon the first act, which you mentioned, and really just kind of like goes there, and also like adds some like just a totally different perspective from the Justin Long character. Like his first thought when he sees that creepy room is, oh, I can put more square footage on my listing for the house. Like he's not even disturbed by this whole like labyrinth of tunnels under the house. He just sees it as a way to get more money when he sells the house. So there's just so many things there that they added to the movie, which was a big risk, but I think it paid off in a lot of ways too.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this could have gone very wrong. Because I kind of felt a little uncomfortable watching his character at the start, because we see that, you know, and they very kind of clearly, you know, it starts out with like there's an allegation against him, but they make sure to make it so it's not ambiguous, because then when he's at the bar at his friend with his friends, he essentially admits, you know, to sexually assaulting this actress. And but then you see him at the house kind of like sizing things up, and it's like, well, these scenes like are comedic, and like this guy like isn't, like he's in this like terrible like maybe haunted place or whatever where these monsters are, and he's doing this, and so you're laughing, but you're like, should I be like laughing at this character, or like what are they going to do with him? And so I was kind of concerned that they were going to give, you know, Justin Long, his character was AJ, I thought they were going to give AJ a redemption arc. I was very worried about it, and I'm so glad that he did not get redemption. We see that he plays along, and that again, kind of like he was when he was out in Hollywood, that he has that smile. He can put on that kind of fake face, even in front of Georgina's character Tess. And but then when it comes to saving himself and putting himself first, no matter what he, you know, does to other people, we see that at the end, and he gets his.
Yeah. It was you kind of see these glimmers of his character where you're wondering which way he's going to go. He runs across the Richard Brake character, who is now an old man living in a back room of these tunnels, which we got to see his whole backstory in like another Pulp Fiction flashback. So and we see how he's like disturbed by these videotapes, and you know what, it's kind of like he's almost like going through, kind of being forced to look at some of the things that he's done. And to Zach's credit, like, yeah, it could have been really easy to make us like try to root for, like it would, like they didn't try to make you root for the character by the end. Like he still ended up being like this piece of crap, you know, and put himself first. But it's like another thing where you really don't know where they're going to go with it. And it feels very real, even in the most outlandish situation. And unfortunately, you know, it's very timely in how, you know, we've seen that kind of behavior in real life too, where, you know, these, you know, people, you know, are unfortunately doing stuff like this, and they get, you know, a lot of times get away with stuff like this. So it was kind of interesting to see that character go there and then get the just desserts at the end too, when the creature, you know, sticks their fingers in his eyeballs, and it's like, oh, okay, well, we saw where that character ended up. So
Yeah. And you know, and then of course our main character Tess, you know, they kind of put her through the ringer. And you know, it's interesting because, you know, I'll I'll segue it for a second because Scott couldn't join us today, had some scheduling issues, but he had seen it, and so I think while he did enjoy it, I think he mentioned his 2 cents. I think they want to share was that he kind of had some problems with the story. And we only talked quickly over WhatsApp, so I didn't get to dive into what those problems really were. But I can imagine it was more about how everything didn't necessarily tie together or make sense in a completely organic way. And to each their own. Like, I think that's a completely valid criticism, is that this movie requires you to really believe that Tess would go downstairs multiple times, try to go back to save people, not find a way, once she finally gets out, would go back to the house. But I think that Zach was much more interested in playing with the audience and aggravating the audience in some cases. I feel like some of these things were intentional. Now, maybe they were solutions to some story, almost like, how do we keep them there? Of course, right? You got to be able to keep them there in the house. But I also think they're done in a way, in some cases, where it seems like they're stretched out, or they're done in a way that kind of winks at the audience, where you're like, no, don't do that. And so when you see her go downstairs and use it for the first time, and then you see her like use the mirror to like light things, and then she's walking in, we're like, why would you do that? And
but at least she used the mirror to do that in the first place, because I feel like there's a lot of self-aware moments where Zach knows he's anticipating the audience critiquing a lot of these decisions, and that's why, like, with the camera going back to the cell phone when she realizes that she left it upstairs, or like, the camera movements are very knowing of, hey, this is something that, unfortunately she left it in the other room, and she realizes how, dumb of a like mistake that was, but hey, it happened, and it could happen to anybody.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's, a lot of it is, like I say, you still got to make a movie, you still have to have things happen. And I think he has fun with that. And it actually wasn't because I had heard some criticisms of that before seeing the movie, and it wasn't as like bad in that department as I expected, because I think she does take a lot of, like, when she says nope, like, when the door first opens in the basement, and like how she props the chair up on the door, like we see her kind of try to like create these little like obstacles to try and give her a good escape route and stuff like that, even though it's still a very dangerous situation. But there's even when they go to the water tower for safety, and the guy says, like, right after he says, I've been here for like 15 years and she's never come here, and then she just bursts through the wall. I mean, that's Zach knowing, like, he's just like totally toying with your expectations of like this false sense of security that you get in a horror movie. And I kind of love that he does that, even though I know it could be very frustrating for other viewers.
Yeah, it's like, when Bill Skarsgård, his character's name is Keith, when he goes downstairs, she doesn't hear him anymore. And she walks downstairs. And I'm like, no, if I had just met you like within the last few days, Derek, and I wasn't sure about you, and you went downstairs and I didn't hear anything, and I knew there was a kill room down there, I would not go to see how you were doing. I would call it in.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, especially because that's more on him, right? Like, that's his dumb decision.
She said, we got to leave. And he's like, no.
Especially when we know later that he wasn't in on it. Like, he just willingly went down there as like a good guy. Like, why would you not just, get out of there?
Yeah.
That's really on him. And she's trying to be a good person and help people out. But yeah, I know it's definitely a lot to take in there as a viewer.
Yeah. And then she gets the car. She could, potentially drive away, and she floors it and drives into the house and gets stuck. So, Yeah, I mean, I had fun with all of that. And and maybe that isn't Scott's. I'm just assuming Scott's going to listen to this. He's like, that's not what I had a problem with. Maybe it was with excuse me, maybe it was with Richard Brake, his Frank character, and some of that setup, like logistically, like how he never got caught, and logistically, like how he was able to tunnel things out in the basement. But I don't know. But that's another part that's interesting, is that like we get details, but we don't get all the details, which I kind of like. I hope there's not another movie, but like if this were like a big franchise had been around for 30 years, we'd get the Frank, prequel movie. We'd get with him tunneling everything, and we'd learn what's in every little corner in space, because it feels like the way they moved, it's like we didn't see everywhere that was tunneled out, and it looked like it made it to other homes. And of course, like those other homes, like they're all kind of broken down, or they broken down because Frank or some of his creations got out and took out the other neighbors. We don't know. And I think that kind of unknown element helps you, or allows you to kind of speculate and create the worst thing you can in your mind, because we don't know what happened. We do know they give us just enough info to know who Frank is, what he did, but we don't see the fall of the neighborhood. And whether he was, I don't think he was a single contributor to it. But maybe he was. We don't know. So I do think that was cool. They leave some of that up to your imagination. And we haven't talked about, we have not talked about the mother, which is, I mean, it definitely, what do you call it? A character, a creature, whatever you want to call it for the ages. I think, again, there were so many kind of smart choices made to humanize this character, but not to humanize this character immediately. So, at first we're terrified, and and then when Tess and AJ are captured, and and we realize that she's trying, the mother's trying to feed them, which is that's something too. There are definitely some gross out scenes there, especially for people who don't watch a lot of horror movies, that might make you gag. But then by the end, this character is really sympathetic, and even when the movie ends, this isn't a character that was, that had a real shot, right? I mean, this is a character that has been bred by Richard Brake's Frank, and he's he has what do you call it? He has abducted and killed and impregnated. We don't know how many people, and it's terrible stuff. And so you feel bad for Frank's victims, and I think that's part of what that flashback kind of helps with. It kind of it humanizes his victims. They're not, at least one of them is not faceless. We see who he had abducted, and we see what he had created as a result of decades of him being allowed to roam free. And so by the end of it, at least for me, and I would think for many people watching it, like, you just feel bad for this character. This character is, this mother is just trying to take care of someone, and it seems like at the end, is okay, and realizes that it's okay if you kill me. And so it goes from this movie just really kind of pulls at your emotions. It goes from something that's really tense to something, where you're like terrified of these monsters. You're laughing, or chuckling when Justin Long is measuring the house. And then by the end, you feel sad for the mother, and for kind of, almost everybody involved. I don't feel bad for Frank, and I don't feel bad for AJ. But for everybody else, you're kind of left feeling bad for him.
Yeah, there's a lot of humanity that's found within the horror as things unfold throughout the film, and we get to know more about what Frank was doing. And so, yeah, this monster that's doing this is in fact a victim as well. And that is, I think, another layer of the movie to digest. And it another thing where it could have been really easy to just have it be like, some creature that emerged from like the depths of hell or something, or some subterranean creature. But in fact, it's like all resulting from the sin, like these horrible things that are done by this guy over the decades, played by Richard Brake. And so, yeah, it's another, and there's some social commentary there as well. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I think there's just so much more than meets the eye in this movie. And I think Zach, like, maybe some of it works better than it doesn't, but Zach took a lot of risks in trying to do something really out there and took some really big swings. And even if it misses, or like there's maybe some, some things that you might shake your head at, like, why would they do that? I think overall it's just such a great, like, a great piece as a whole, where you're like, that really turned out pretty darn good, all things considered. And it gives you a lot to think about after watching the movie. And I think it actually kind of makes you want to watch the movie again, even knowing a lot of the surprises that are going to happen, just to see it from a different perspective. So there's a lot to unpack there. And shout out to Matthew Patrick Davis, who played the mother, because that performance was very very cool, and a lot of nightmare fuel there. And I love how they shot the mother going through the tunnels and using the shadows, and kind of like not always putting that character right in your face, but kind of using the subtlety of the shadows to really like amp up the terror. It kind of felt like a Resident Evil game or something at some times, or Silent Hill, where you just kind of are like, wait, did I just see that in the background? So I love how they were a little subtle with it too, as much as it is an in your face movie a lot of times too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the effects are great. I think the way that they played the mother and kind of slowly revealed more and more, almost like, an alien. I thought that was pretty cool. And excuse me, the one thing we didn't talk about was the police scene, which I think was very, relevant, and then of course terrible, is that you see that, they Tess makes it out, and that that they call the police, and the police don't believe her. Say, you're the only one doing something. I'm going to arrest you. If you don't stop bothering us. And they kind of leave to do their own thing. And and so there are kind of so many layers to this movie, where, at the top, it's obviously, you got your straight horror movie. It's like what happens if you get into an Airbnb where all this stuff is going crazy. And, but, underneath that, you have things from like, toxic masculinity to, to issues with the police, to, the things that go on in Hollywood that are covered up. Mm-hmm. And so this is,
and housing issues too, with renting property and really spiking up the cost of living, and how some neighborhoods are exploited for that. So that's a very very prevalent front and center theme in this movie too, where like the guy who owns the house is like just kind of oblivious to everything going on, and couldn't give a damn about the neighborhood. So there's a lot there underneath the surface. So it's pretty cool, because it is like a very, actually I was going to say a gory movie, but it's very restrained in a lot of ways. I was actually expecting it to be much more gory, and it's actually more of what you don't see that kind of gets you thinking about the horror.
Yeah, I mean, the only like things I would say were like quote unquote gory were probably like the head bashing and the eye gouging. The rest of is pretty kind of, the things that you see off the screen are worse. But yeah, I mean, especially as we're talking through all of this, it just makes me realize more and more like what a special movie this is. Like this movie takes so many chances and plays with so many It has so much social commentary, and it breaks your traditional movie structure, and it has comedy, and it has scares. And it's just like, if any one of these things is kind of a little off, it throws the whole movie off. If Justin Long's character, as I had mentioned, AJ, was given a redemption arc, different movie. If they hadn't like, if the scares had been played more for laughs, it wouldn't work. Somehow, though, all of these things that maybe shouldn't all go together, Zach Cregger is able to do it, and it's really an incredible accomplishment. Like, I'm super impressed with this.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those movies that is, you hate to say like an instant cult classic, but I feel like it's got that written all over it, just based on how much is going on in this movie. It's very, it's very much its own thing. It certainly has, plays with their expectations based on other movies. I've also got to give a shout out. If you like this movie, you should definitely read Brian Keene's Urban Gothic, which is about a very similar situation with subterranean creatures living underneath kind of a rundown house. And it's a very kind of similar plot, but also does its own thing as well. But yeah, so definitely I would pair that book with this if you're looking for more horror in this vein. But it's so great. It's the performances. I love how it definitely ruffles some feathers if you're looking for a more streamlined viewing experience, but I love how it just keeps taking left turns when you expect it to go straight. And I think it does it to its benefit. And it's certainly never boring. I mean, there's always something going on. It leaves you wanting more. I mean, I could see there being a Barbarians, like go the aliens route, even though I think it would be special if they didn't sequelize it. But I just love that a movie like this got the platform that it has. And I think, it's not necessarily like raking in that It Chapter 2 money or anything like that, but I hopefully with word of mouth and later on the home video market, maybe it will kind of really grow that cult audience and kind of get to that Malignant type of following, because it certainly deserves it.
Well, it had I guess first I'll say, if Zach Cregger wanted to do Barbarians, I would still be game. He can do whatever he wants. But the budget was only, 10.5 million. I say only 10.5 million, but when you're making movies, when you usually see a studio pick, like, you're talking, 50 million, 30 million. So this is only 10.5. So it already made like 13.4 at the time that we're recording this. So like, obviously there's marketing expenses, but like, it's only going to take another, week or two for it to earn its money back. And then everything else is gravy, VOD and Blu-ray and all that. So, I mean, this is, I'm amazed that Disney put this out. And I have a theory, and I think it really comes down to that they knew that there was no way this was going to like chip away at like their Disney money. Because it's kind of weird that like the Fear Street movies were under 20th Century, but those producers had the option to kind of take it, and they did to Netflix, as far as I understand. But then with Prey, like it went to Hulu, and maybe Hulu paid for it a little bit more to be a Hulu exclusive. But like, to me, that would have been a good theatrical movie, but it also costs more to advertise. So I know there are different factors at play. What I think with this one is they had like probably a good audience score from test screenings. They knew critics liked it. So they figured, well, we don't have to advertise it a lot. Maybe it can be like a Paranormal Activity. I think The Black Phone was showing that, hey, like we can do well. But like, thank you to like whoever saw this and was like, yeah, we'll put it out. First of all, yeah, we'll make it. And then, yeah, we'll put it out in the theaters. I'm just surprised that this didn't make the chopping block. Like, how did this not get cut off? Because we saw, The Empty Man was a 20th Century one that got cut. That went straight to last year. That went basically straight to VOD. So I'm surprised that Barbarian um, made it to theaters, but I'm so happy that, for some people, like, this might be their like first R-rated horror movie, and then for people who've seen a lot of horror movies before, and again, I know why they're the comparisons, but like, you get Malignant last year, you get Barbarian this year. They're just weird movies, and it's just cool. It's just cool to see weird movies like this again, because I mean, this was a risky movie from start to finish.
And I feel like this is kind of like Malignant, where Malignant felt like it was from the Dark Castle remake era of the late 90s, early 2000s. This feels like, even though it's very reflective of the modern times and a lot of social issues going on right now, the horror, like, this feels like the horror elements of this kind of harken back to that like really grimy, like, what did I just watch kind of early 2000s horror movie, where stuff like this was getting theatrical distribution, and it was like pre cinematic universes and a kind of just, I mean, there were still remakes and things like that happening, but it definitely feels like it's kind of harkening back to that era a little bit. And it's so great when you see like an original idea like this get to find an audience. And even if it doesn't set records at the box office, just the fact that it is in theaters is pretty cool. So I hope that we get to see more of this in the future, in addition to all the fun franchise movies that we get to look forward to it, because we're just so spoiled as horror fans right now with Halloween and Hellraiser and everything in between. So it's fun to throw a Barbarian in there and be like, what the hell was that?
Yeah, and to see people reacting so well to it. I mean, one of the movies, it's not close, but one of the things that this kind of reminded me of was like The House That Dripped Blood. It's an Amicus anthology movie from the 70s, with Peter Cushing and others. And it's just about this house and like the things that happen to the people in the house. And then it all kind of ties together in the end, not in the same way as like this does, because it followed more of like the traditional anthology format. But and then I think more so, like, I think this to me like felt like something we'd see out of the 70s, from like Wes Craven's like Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes. And I feel like this didn't push things as far as those two movies did, but I can see this like coming out like around the same time, coming out at drive-ins, being like kind of forbidden fruit. And yeah, it was, like I said, it was just cool stuff. And even knowing how many, people liked it and how many people were surprised by it, I mean, I still, the hype still didn't prevent me from not only enjoying it, but loving it. That being said, I feel like this isn't a movie like I'll revisit a lot. For some, and if for people it is, that's totally cool. Like, the movie also for me though is like a little icky, and it's like, or maybe a lot, and it's because of some of the subject matter. I feel bad for the mother character, and so like I said, I think this is a movie like I would like to see again. I would like to show other people who may not have seen it to see their reaction to it. But I also like, this wouldn't be something like I would play weekly. If you're someone that you would, and that these are the kinds of movies that you're like, hey, like these are comfort movies for me. I don't judge. It's totally cool. But yeah, like I said, I thought it was like I said, a little icky by the end of it. I left. I was like, oh, like it wasn't like I enjoyed the ride, but it was also like by the end it was kind of like a bummer.
Yeah, when you're not like by the end, you're not rooting for the creature to die. Like, you want Tess to get away, but you don't necessarily, like, you feel bad about her having to kill the mother. And I'm glad that Georgina Campbell got away though, because I thought that her character was going to, like, when she got shot by Justin Long's character, or when she keeps putting herself in harm's way, I kept expecting one of the twists to be that she would die as well. So I'm really glad that she at least got a happy ending. But yeah, you still come away from it being like, what did I just watch? Especially with that amazing shot of the mother like flying off the water tower, and you're just like, whoa. Like, they did, like, it's like a beautiful shot, but it's also like, what is happening right now?
Oh yeah, I heard there's some people laughing at my theater, and I'm like,
I feel like that. Yeah, there's this certain moments in this movie where some people's reaction will be to laugh, others will be to gasp, and everything in between. And really, I think that's the sign of a movie that's never boring. So I think this will be a movie that we'll be talking about, even 10 years from now, because it definitely stands out. And who knows, maybe they'll make 10 sequels in that time. I don't know, but I'd be happy if they just left it at Barbarian, just because it's kind of nice to have, that standalone original film with some ambiguity, and where you can kind of fill in the backstory yourself. But as uncomfortable as it is, there's still so much restraint. Like, I love how they didn't show certain things, and like we didn't need to see what was on the videotapes. You just based on like how Justin Long was reacting to that,
Yeah.
especially given like what his character has done, him reacting to that way. Like,
that's a good point.
You just know, okay, that's really, whatever was on there was awful. And I feel like movies in the past, they might have shown more of that. So I'm, as much of this movie is kind of in your face, it also is very restrained too. So I think Zach Cregger does a really good job of doing that balancing act. And then, but at the same time, he's like, let's show this monster, bursting through a wall and yanking this guy's arm off and then beating him to death with it. So it's cinema.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this was good stuff. If you haven't seen it and you listen to us talk about it, well, we spoiled all of it for you, but we did give the warning. But still, you should go and see it. I know for certain, because I know some people predict like this will probably be on my favorites list. This will be on my favorites list.
Oh,
I guarantee
absolutely.
you go. You check a few months from now. This will make it. But yeah, I think with that said, this episode has almost come to an end. So I'm happy to have Derek here so that we could talk about it, because I was excited to talk to somebody about it. I haven't had a chance to, so I'm glad we got to chat.
Definitely.
Before we end, I did want to remind everyone that we are in week 2 of our Hellraiser Razor. And led by Brian Christopher. It is a charity stream that he is running. We had the first weekend, and it was very successful. And week 2 of the charity stream starts Friday night, Saturday night. Excuse me. You can find all the details on Daily Dead, or you can follow us on Twitch/DailyDeadTwitch, and or Twitch.tv, I should say. And then you can get notifications every time we get online. I will be joining. Well, I know, Derek, you joined last weekend. This weekend, I have Hellworld, which everyone's like, oh, Hellworld. But I like it, so I'll be talking about it. And
well, I know it's not Brian's least favorite, because he clarified several times that was the one that we watched together, Hellseeker. So I'm assuming anything is, according to Brian, at least anything is better than Hellseeker.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's Revelation. Is it Revelation or Revelation? So many movies took that title. It's what I can't remember.
It's a very edgy title, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember if it's Revelation or Revelation.
I think it's the plural, but
yeah. But anyway, that is my least favorite. So yeah, hopefully you can join us on Friday or Saturday, and like I said, head over to Daily Dead for more details. And we want to thank Brian Smith, not Brian Christopher, Brian Smith, our engineer, for helping us out each and every episode. And as always, we want to thank our listeners, including those of you who've signed up for a Corpse Club membership. You can head over to corpseclub.com to check out all of our episodes. You can sign up to become a member if you're not one already. It'll give you the ability to sign up for different membership tiers. We have Corpse Club membership card. We have a pin. You can pick an episode topic. We have a t-shirt. So head over to corpseclub.com. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Every rating and review helps. You can find us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast providers. If you want to get in touch, you can reach out anytime. We're at contact@corpseclub.com. On Twitter, we're at Daily Dead News. We're at Corpse Club. And on Instagram and Facebook, we are under Corpse Club as well. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, stay scary.